Camera, go.
Ready to join the movement? Then welcome to the big picture. Joining me for a special Monday edition of the Big Picture Rumble are Sam Sachs, RT political commentator, Chris Ullman, conservative commentator and activist, and Neal Asbury, entrepreneur and host of the Truth for America radio show. Thanks to you, and thanks to all of you for joining me. Let's get started with this. Today is Veterans Day, a day when we look back at and honor the men and women who have courageously fought and even died for our nation. Yet today, while we're supposed to be honoring this nation's veterans, many of them will be going hungry. That's because thanks to the Republican-demanded food stamp cuts that went into effect earlier this month, 1 million veterans have lost access to the food and nutrition that they need to survive. So, is this the way Republicans think we should honor our veterans, by ignoring them and taking away their access to food?
Well, let me just say that thank you to all the veterans out there, and we just so appreciate your service to our country. And what's really sad is when this president campaigned for office, he promised that he would do something about jobs and the economy. And what's really sad is that liberals just want to give food stamps to veterans, while conservatives are concerned about them having good jobs, access to good jobs, and taking care of their families.
What conservative program would give those jobs? Would give jobs to the vets? Are you suggesting the government should be hiring vets?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, I missed that. There were things that...
Are you suggesting that the government should be hiring vets the way that Franklin Roosevelt did?
I'm suggesting that this president didn't keep his promise about jobs, jobs, jobs. All he did was put up more roadblocks that keep the private sector from creating jobs. And this has hurt our veterans as well as many others.
All those pieces of jobs legislation that Nancy Pelosi passed out of the House, or that the Democrats...
I think the jobs that conservatives, and unfortunately that even President Obama has said that he's trying to get veterans work for, is at Walmart. I mean, these are the jobs that we think that veterans deserve here, unfortunately, and that's a sad state. Look, on Veterans Day, you want to honor veterans in two ways: by making sure we're providing for all their needs, and by also making sure we're not creating more veterans with more military misadventures and U.S. wars of aggression around the world. Unfortunately, we're not doing either of those very well. And we've known for a long time that conservatives have had a problem with helping the poor in this country, helping working people in this country. And just the fact that veterans have now joined the poor and working, the downtrodden working class in this country, Republicans just loop them into this mix with the rest of the poor.
Neal, do you have a solution to this problem?
Yeah, Tom, let me jump in here. Of course, it's the private economy that must create these jobs. But the president is doing nothing to help the private economy. Let's treat our veterans with dignity and honor. Let them come home to a job that can support their family, a job that provides benefits. But this president has been totally inept at creating jobs.
I thought the Republican position was the government doesn't create jobs.
The government doesn't create jobs.
It creates an environment. It creates an environment. Tom, the unemployment rate for veterans is over 2% higher than the general population. How can this president go to sleep at night knowing that? He has totally let down our veterans. And to say that conservatives don't support our veterans, then why is it that the military and veterans overwhelmingly support and vote for conservatives? That's just a wrong statement to make. Of course conservatives support our veterans, but we support them with honor and dignity, and we want them to have a job in the private sector.
You support them by waving flags and giving them platitudes.
No, support them by supporting government policies that will free the private sector to create more jobs so that veterans can get jobs.
Yes,
not just hand them a government handout. This president has not kept his promise on jobs because he's been worried about every other issue.
Bush tax cuts worked really, really good, didn't they?
Yes,
Veterans groups are trying to convince U.S. senators to finally ratify an international treaty intended to raise the standards of living people with disabilities. The United Nations agreed to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities in 2007, and the Obama administration signed on in 2009. But last year, the Senate failed to ratify the seemingly bipartisan treaty, even though former Republican Senator Bob Dole lobbied Republican senators from his own wheelchair. Now veterans are stepping up the pressure on Washington to finally ratify the treatment. Don't the men and women who courageously fought for our country and who have the scars and wounds to prove it deserve to live the rest of their lives with dignity and respect?
Absolutely, Tom. But let me tell you this.
Then why
every
are you guys
news
blocking
report out there says that our laws are the strongest in the world, and that the only reason we would
why
need
not sign on to this and make it strong for the rest of the world as
well?
well?
To encourage other countries, basically, we don't need to sign on to this because we already have the strongest laws, and we know that too many treaties actually has a negative impact on our laws.
You and Neil, that the president needs to do something, and now you're saying no,
but
don't do anything.
This won't do anything. This is a feel-good, do-nothing thing.
Then why not
Typical
do it?
liberals
It's a feel-good, do-nothing thing. Then why not do it? The reason why, look, the reason why this is not being passed is because there's this conspiracy theory movement among right-wingers in Congress that this is part of some UN one world government thing. It couldn't be any farther from the truth. But you see people like Rick Santorum as recently as a few days ago vowing again to defeat this for no reason, even though you have people like Bob Dole and you have veterans who think, okay, I might have what's the needs provided for me here. I might be able to get into buildings wherever I need to go. But when I travel around the world, I don't have those that same access to disability services. So why not the United States take a lead on this? And it's a shame that we're too tied to conspiracy theories to do anything about it.
Oh, my goodness.
Neil, veterans, those serving since 2001 have an unemployment rate of 10%. Our national average is 7.3. Veterans make up 7% of our population, but 13% of the homeless. Female vets are the fastest growing segment of the entire homeless population. Considering all these problems, don't you think it's time for a new GI Bill? I mean, FDR and Harry Truman and Republican Dwight Eisenhower did some real good with the last GI Bill.
Oh, absolutely. And conservatives support our military far more so than liberals do. I mean, the whole sequester of our defense spending was requested by the liberals. I mean, if the liberals got their way, they would want to reduce our defense down to that of Canada and give all the money away in entitlements. But the best way to do it is to provide jobs for these people. Right. Good-paying jobs that only the private economy can do. But they need the support from this president, and this president just simply has given up on creating jobs.
I'm sure
pivot
Neil
to this, pivot to that, but don't talk about jobs.
I'm sure Neil understands that the GI Bill was government investment. It was government spending. And he says, yeah, absolutely, we need one. That requires government spending. Unfortunately, there is no place for government spending in the Republican-controlled House. It's austerity, austerity, austerity.
There's plenty. I can suggest a dozen programs right now that I would love to cut to put into a new GI Bill. Let's start with just even some small ones. The Corporation for PBS and all those things that we simply can never, ever cut if you're a liberal.
Sure,
well, we have 12. Any kind of government subsidy for private business is great. Let's do it.
Oil companies.
Let's do it.
How about the $500 million we gave to Solyndra?
Yes, it's a great place to start. Great place.
That's a great down payment.
Or the $40 billion we give to the top 5 oil companies.
I haven't heard one affirmative or positive suggestion from either one of you. You keep saying the president should be creating jobs, and yet I'm not hearing. I haven't heard one. Nancy Pelosi actually passed legislation out of the House that, for example, did away with the tax advantage that companies like Bain Capital have when they shut down factories in the United States and move them overseas. Republicans filibustered it. What positive thing would you do, or would you have the president do, that would create jobs?
Let's go look.
Let's start off with getting rid of Obamacare. Hey, that's a great idea. And how about this administration that is obsessed with raising
fewer
taxes?
People have health insurance.
How about the $1.8 trillion of regulation?
People can go to the doctor.
Tom, there's so many ways to get this economy going, but this president is totally blind.
Let's cut corporate tax rates so that businesses can come back to the United States instead of being forced
that worked really
to
great
go
in 2000,
overseas.
didn't it?
Well, right now, when it makes more sense to have a plant overseas than it does at home because we have the highest corporate tax rate.
Reagan cut our corporate tax rates. 23 years later, we've gone from corporate taxes representing about a third of our government income to about 10% of government income, which means the taxes on average working people have gone up. And, by the way, none of those jobs materialized. Instead, you've got somewhere between $55 and $90 trillion stashed overseas by corporations.
Tom, you're forgetting about the Reagan economic good times in the 90s. And number one, that we have the highest corporate tax rate, and that has
You mean on that $3 trillion credit card tab he ran up? You give me a $3 trillion credit card tab, and I'll show you good times.
And for the record, whenever you hear highest corporate income tax rate, we pay the second lowest corporate taxes of any of the developed countries. Just put that out there.
On Saturday, I want to move along here. Talk about guns. On Saturday, around 40 armed men, women, and children waited outside a Dallas area restaurant to protest a membership meeting for the Texas chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. According to a spokeswoman for Moms Demand Action, the moms were inside the restaurant when members of Open Carry Texas, an open carry advocacy group, pulled up in the parking lot and started getting guns out of their trunks. The members then waited in the restaurant parking lot for the 4 moms to come out. Eventually, the gun nuts left, and the moms relocated to another restaurant. This is amazing. This was a private meeting that these women organized on Facebook. They were not inviting other people there. It wasn't some kind of public spectacle. There was no speeches to be given or anything. They were just getting together in a restaurant to talk about what people who are concerned about gun violence in America can do. And all of a sudden, you've got these bullies showing up, waving guns around specifically to intimidate them. This is a freak show. It's a horror show.
It speaks to
Neil. What is the deal? Why are these gun nuts? Why do they feel the need to show up and intimidate these women? Is it because they all have small penises?
Hey, well, Tom, I don't know about that, but I will tell you this, that it is a very bad PR move. I mean, it was the wrong thing to do. Look, the next governor of Texas is probably going to be State Attorney Greg Abbott. You know, he is a good and avid supporter of gun rights. These people should be out there trying to get him elected and not going and doing this PR disaster. Tom, you and I can agree that this was the wrong thing to do, but it does show the emotion behind
bullying.
the Second Amendment. And I support the Second Amendment.
Before we've got to hit the break, I'm curious what both Chris and
it shows how childish the gun industry has really become. I mean, there's no industry that's more protected in Washington than the gun industry. There's a higher chance of Obamacare being repealed than any gun controls getting passed. There are no gun controls going to get passed, and yet every time, whether it's some rally or whether it's a group of mothers meeting at a Mexican restaurant in Texas to talk about it, they freak out and a bunch of gun nuts show up armed to the teeth to intimidate
Chris, your thoughts
people.
Real quick, please.
I don't know what their meaning was, but I have an interesting picture that actually shows the 90-degree angle view of this was that they were having their own demonstration, their own right to meet together. Now, the tactic may have been wrong, but they certainly had the right to go out there and to have their own view.
But it's a tactic that's repeated again and again. Show up armed to marches. This isn't an aberration here. This
they
is
were
the
not
tactic
breaking
that's used
the law.
around the country.
They were not breaking the law. There is a right to open carry long guns in Texas, which is what they were doing.
Well,
they were not
maybe that's a
breaking
law
the
we should reconsider. More of tonight's Big Picture Rumble right after the break. Welcome back to tonight's Big Picture Rumble. Joining me, Sam Sachs, Chris Allman, and NealAsbury. Let's get back to it. A train carrying millions of gallons of crude oil derailed in Alabama on Friday, setting off a massive and fiery explosion. The accident could be the most severe of its kind in the United States since transportation of crude oil by train increased 3 years ago with the rise of fracking. But the media hasn't said a word about the explosion, which isn't surprising. According to the AP, some 750 oil field incidents or spills have occurred just since January 2012, all without public knowledge. There have been 300 unreported spills in North Dakota alone. So if millions of gallons of oil are already leaking into and damaging the environment each year without being reported, do we really need another giant oil pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline, running right through the middle of the country and posing even more dangers to the environment and to our health? And by the way, you know, a giant target, a giant bullseye to any terrorist who, wants to do something to us?
No, we don't. And
Neil?
No, we don't need a giant pipeline. And it's sad that here we are in the 21st century, still trying to cling to 19th century forms of energy here. And it just shows. Look, this is going to be a massive cleanup. This latest, and this happens on a week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis. We have these environmental spills, and it shows that there's a price to burning fossil fuels. There's a price to this sort of energy, and it's a price that's not borne by carbon producers. It's borne by we, the taxpayers. And it shows that capitalism can't fix this problem. There's no market incentive to get the fossil fuel industry to start using renewable energy. This is going to take action. It's going to take regulations to ultimately make that transition.
Yes, it is. It's going to boil down to consumers being forced to accept by government mandates on what they can and can't use. You know, you talk
if it's
about
killing all of us, then that's what it needs to take.
How many
this is killing the planet.
Today, how many people today died in auto accidents? How many people died in this train derailment?
Look at the enormous amount of government regulations that govern auto.
How many people died going around the Beltway in the last month? I mean, come on. The bottom line is this.
Chris, it may well be that as a result of these oil spills, lots and lots of people are going to die. They're going to die of cancers.
Hey, Tom, I have a novel idea. Let's pass the Keystone Pipeline. The Keystone Pipeline will solve all these problems. Do you know that the stocks of railroad companies now are going through the roof? And the carbon footprint of a railroad line is far much greater than that of a pipeline. So why are not the liberals out there marching for the Keystone Pipeline right now?
So you're going to, Neil, are you going to defend all 2,000 miles of that pipeline? Where you're going to put a guard every 100 feet or something? I mean, what happens when some wackadoodle, whether it's some right-wing crazy terrorist or whether it's some Middle Eastern terrorist decides that they're going to put, all it would take is a half a dozen sticks of dynamite.
Well, Tom, I mean, why hasn't happened in Alaska? Look, come on, you could make up anything you want, but the fact is that the pipeline would efficiently and with so much less carbon emissions transport this oil, and the cost of doing so is about $7 a barrel compared to $35 by the rail lines, which is being passed on to the consumer. The poor people, the people
but
who need
everything you're saying, everything that you and Chris are saying is predicated on the assumption that we should be having an economy running on oil.
Absolutely.
If we simply put a carbon tax of $25 a ton on carbon, which is...
Do you know who that is going to hurt, Tom?
Have already done.
That is going to hurt the poor.
Finland, what you've seen in Ireland. No, it did not. Because the money, 100% of the money is returned to the people. You return the money to the people, you put the carbon tax on the carbon, and then what you discover is the reason why 21% of the electricity in Iowa, the reason why 23% of the electricity in Texas is now being produced by wind power is because it's actually cheaper than oil.
Yeah, and also this argument that we need the pipeline is predicated on the idea that we're paying for oil what the price of oil should actually be. We're not. We're paying a much cheaper price for fossil fuels than they actually cost, given the externalities here. If we paid the correct price,
yes, because they're not.
Go ahead.
We're not paying for. Nobody's paying for the cost of it. But even more importantly, the Keystone XL pipeline is, TransCanada, and it's on their website. You can read it. TransCanada said that if they complete that Keystone XL pipeline, the price of gasoline in the United States and diesel fuel in the Midwest is going to go up, not down, because they are not trying to get that oil to the Gulf Coast because all of a sudden there's a lot of cars driving around in southern Louisiana. They're trying to get that oil from Canada all the way down to the Gulf Coast so that the Koch brothers can make a $100 billion profit refining it into gasoline and diesel fuel and putting it on ships and shipping it to China, to Mexico, to England, to Brazil. I mean, they already have the customers lined up. This is not oil for the United States. All we get is the smokestack crud. We get the poison. We get the cancers. We're the sacrifice zone for the Koch brothers' profit.
If your statistics are true, Tom.
That's just not true. Tom, that's just not true. Come on, and it's our industry that's going to benefit from this because we have a stable, affordable energy supply in this country. And think of all the thousands and thousands of jobs that we're going to create.
This energy is, the Keystone Pipeline is not going to the United States. It's going to refineries on the Gulf Coast, and then the stuff is being exported. If it wasn't for export, they'd end it in the middle of Texas.
If your statistics are true, Tom, and I mean, here you are comparing us to Ireland. I mean, our country and Ireland are two vastly different in size, in makeup, in energy use. Our country runs on oil, and if your statistics are true about wind power and everything, then I guess the market is going to show that is going to be much more advantageous. It just hasn't yet, and it will hurt
if we start
Americans.
Charging for the cost of carbon.
It will.
Of course, if we government mandate.
Elizabeth,
yes.
I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to get your take on Elizabeth Warren here. According to an article in the New Republic, when asked whether she was considering running for president, Senator Elizabeth Warren refused to say either yes or no. So some mainstream Democrats are beginning to see Warren as a threat, and according to a recent Gallup poll, the Democratic Party is becoming more of Elizabeth Warren's party. According to Gallup, the percentage of Democrats with very negative views of the banking industry increased more than fivefold since 2007. And between 2001 and 2011, the percentage of Democrats who were dissatisfied with, quote, the size and influence of major corporations, end quote, rose from 51 to 79%. So could Elizabeth Warren make a run for president in 2016 and pose a real threat to Hillary Clinton and her support base? Could she even win the Democratic nomination? Is the Democratic Party undergoing a progressive transformation? Sam, your thoughts on that?
I think perhaps. I mean, yes, there's a kind of a mainstream coalescing around Hillary Clinton who hasn't even decided whether she's going to run or not. But there's an enormous amount of progressives out there who are disappointed with the Obama administration, disappointed with how the president's handled Wall Street, how he's handled our wars, drones, surveillance, all these things, who see Hillary Clinton as an extension of that, who are not ready to get behind Hillary Clinton and won't ever be ready to get behind Hillary Clinton and see that more Tim Geithner, Lawrence Summers approach to Wall Street. Look, there's no bigger hero to progressives politically than Elizabeth Warren. She talks. She's a candidate born out of the Occupy movement, basically. And look, she might have to dust up her foreign policy. She's been quiet on important issues, whether it's Syria, U.S. intervention in the Middle East, stuff like that. But she's going to be in the Senate for a few more years. She can take a position on all these issues, and she should take a position from Ron Paul. Here he comes out. He's gotten tons of popularity. That populist outrage in America isn't just directed at Wall Street. It's directed at our foreign wars, too. And she can capitalize on both of those.
I think it would be awesome.
Neil and Chris, I'm curious your take.
Go for it. I think it would be great if Elizabeth Warren ran for president, because I think what we would see is a definite distinction between the two candidates. And one thing that a lot of independents complain about is that they see the two parties as nominating people that really there are no real differences. Well, if Elizabeth Warren is nominated by the Democrats, we will see a stark difference between the two parties. And I look forward to that. I really think that would be a good choice for Americans to make, to really see what progressives and liberals stand for. And she is an excellent example of that.
Right. You'll see an advocate for the middle class against a governor from New Jersey who's
Republican ticket. Ted Cruz?
Oh, I don't know. Scott Walker. I mean, we've got quite a large number of people who would.
Yeah, can I jump in here for a second?
Neil,
can I jump in here for a second?
Here.
You know, yeah, it was the lunatic fringe of the Democrat Party that beat Hillary and elected Obama.
Party.
And that's right, is the lunatic fringe that got Obama elected.
No, there is no such thing as a Democrat Party. It's a Democratic Party.
Elizabeth Warren speaks to that part of the party. So I think that Hillary's got a real problem here. And I'm in Florida, and I got to tell you, I think this country knows that we don't need another Bush and we don't need another Clinton. So I think this thing is wide open, and I think that Hillary's got a problem. I think that we have fatigue right now. We have Clinton fatigue, we have Bush fatigue. I think this party's ready to move on to something else.
So
I agree.
Which direction, Neil, do you think the Republican Party is going to move? I mean, Chris just mentioned Chris Christie.
It's fascinating. I don't think
Neil Bush.
No, I don't think that we know yet. You know, I think that this thing is wide open. I don't think that Hillary's got it locked up, and I don't think that anyone in the Republican Party's got it wrapped up. But I do like Governor Christie. I think he brings a lot to the table. But we have a lot of candidates on the conservative side right now. It's going to be a very fascinating nominating process on the conservative side. We have a very deep bench. We have many people that can step up right now to be president of this country and to create jobs and get this country back on its feet.
I agree, Neil.
To what extent?
Go ahead, Tom.
To what extent, Chris, do you think that the elections in 2014 are going to be a referendum on this, that they're going to be setting up 2016?
Oh, not at all. I think we need to step back and see who is really out there, but on both sides. And, you know, what we saw in Virginia, I live in Virginia, was once Obamacare became the main message, Ken Cuccinelli went from down 12, 15 points to finishing up, you know, really, really close, because people are tired of the government telling them what to do. So whoever the Republicans nominate, I just hope it's somebody who clearly articulates the conservative vision for America.
If the Republican position is depending on website glitches, they're in trouble.
Oh, it's not a website glitch.
So the Republicans are going to
run
on a platform of health care for nobody. Chris, Neil, and Sam, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tom, for having me.
Good luck with your book tour.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.